the important thing you talked about is worker safety. Yes, the consumers need meat, but if we don't keep our employees happy, we're not going to operate. So the company did a really good job right off the bat. They started taking care of the employee areas, making sure things were getting sanitized. We started doing temperature checks just to make employees feel safer at work. Anyone that did not feel safe was allowed to leave.
Welcome to MeatsPad, a platform to share breakthrough knowledge that is accessible to the entire meat industry. Be ready to hear from meat specialists who will talk about numerous topics in meat science, including animal welfare, meat production, meat quality, and so much more.
This podcast is brought to you by the Niche Meat Processor Assistance Network, the National Provisioner, and UltraSource, the new standard for innovation.
Hello, meat folks. Welcome to the MeatsPad podcast. My name is Francisco Nahar. I'm your host today. This week, we welcome back Dr. Phil Bass. We have some of his former students talking about a very unique beef processing facility, Agri Beef, Brendan Negri and Abbie Uhlenkott. We will discussing about their early career in the beef industry, some of the challenges that I encountered this spring/summer with COVID. Please, Dr. Bass, please introduce our guests. Welcome, everyone.
It's such a pleasure, as always, to connect the broader industry with some different perspectives that may be out there. And I thought that if we brought Brendan and Abbie into the discussion, not only are they kind of in a unique situation where they're transitioning from the college student life and now into kind of a management trainee position, getting to see all the entirety of the workings of a medium but full-scale commercial packing facility, and I thought their perspective could be pretty cool. Talk about we'll get into some of the dynamics of the business, and for those of folks who may be downloading this podcast later on in the future, we'll reference some current happenings, but for the most part, really just kind of talk about the really cool things that are going on with their particular company, some of the future endeavors, and talk about their transitions. And so with that, I'd like to just kind of start the discussions, and I don't know, Brendan, maybe you can be the first to interject here, but can you guys talk a little bit about your transition from student to the operations management trainee position in a commercial packing facility, focusing on beef, of course, is what you guys do, and talk about some of the projects and trainings that you've encountered in your time there so far.
Of course. So it's definitely been a pretty crazy transition from being a student to, well, even just having a full-time job, let alone the situation that Abbie and I are in this management trainee position. It's definitely been pretty exciting for me to try and take, the knowledge that I learned from school, as well as some of the knowledge that I have from my past experience working at the University of Idaho in their meats laboratory, and try and use that as a way to further my learning and my training at Washington Beef, as well as to help the people I work with. Had some opportunities to look into some correlations with hemorrhaging with cattle and stun times and some different things like that to try and help further Washington Beef if possible, but also to help myself continue to learn as I'm trying to adapt to this new phase of my career and of my life, no longer being in school, but actually working for a company like Washington Beef.
Well, and you're being very humble and modest in the way that you're describing things. For a little bit of background, Brendan, I know you have had a lot of knife experience working in a very small university plant setting, but you're kind of our expert on the line right now as far as larger scale harvest processing at a commercial beef plant. And so as we continue to kind of go down our discussion today, we'll probably reference that. But just so everyone that is listening kind of knows, Brendan is really starting to learn a lot more on the harvesting side, whereas Abbie, who is also on the line, has had her initial management trainee experience on the processing side, as in fabrication and so on. And so with that, let's go ahead and bring Abbie on. And Abbie, tell us about your transition. Tell us your background. It's kind of interesting. Both of you have very different backgrounds. Brendan got involved in the meats side, as far as I know, because he liked hunting and fishing, and you were a natural resources major, but still got a lot more of that fabrication hands-on. And maybe, Abbie, go ahead and tell us a little bit of your background and your new role.
Okay, well, I grew up with cattle, so the cattle industry is something I wanted to be involved with for as long as I can remember. I started off pre-vet, and then in college I actually got really into the economics and the accounting, which doesn't have a whole lot to do with cutting meat. But I got in some meat science classes, and I really just started to like them. And I saw it as an opportunity for me to be involved in the cattle industry too. So when this came about, at first it was really just kind of an extension of school. I had a lot to learn, so I showed up and I was just being a sponge, soaking it all in. And then life got crazy. COVID happened, projects came up. I started learning more. I was able to be more involved. So I think my first project plant-wide was doing sanitation shifts across the plant for employee safety. I've been doing a lot of stuff with yields right now, trying to get yields up on the line I'm working on, kind of stepping into the supervisor role there. That's been really exciting, kind of putting some of my leadership skills to use in a new way. And then Brendan and I both got to do the temperature check station for a while, another COVID thing. And then right now I've been working a little bit too on yields from different trim from different lines, and looking at the yield percentage on those, where most of our trim's coming from, depending mostly on percentages, where our 90's coming from, where our 75's coming from. Because we're looking at splitting that up in the future to add a little value to our product. And then moving forward, I think I'm going to play a role in some more yield testing. Since cattle are getting bigger across the industry, we need to adjust our yields a little bit to make sure that we're still getting the most out of our cattle.
Well, and you've just covered a whole bunch of things, and I want to make sure that we make it so it's everyone kind of understands what's going on, because the business as a whole usually kind of has its own language, right? And so you mentioned yields, yields meaning, product coming in versus product going out, and in your case on the fabrication floor, that is huge. That's a big focus, right? Where you have whole carcasses that are entering the fabrication floor, and then they get broken up into multiple different lines. And you have a lot of craftsmen, as I call them, breaking down these breaking down these carcasses to down to the subprimals that go out the door eventually. And you're looking at how much usable meat is coming off of there. But then also you mentioned trim specifications and talking about 70s. So meaning 70% lean, 30% fat, 50s, 50% lean, 50% fat mixtures. And those are some of, I wouldn't necessarily call them a byproduct yet, but it's kind of that transition from carcass to subprimal, which is the primary goal. So you're getting that ribeye or getting the top round off of that carcass. And then you also have some of the stuff that gets trimmed away, as the name would imply, some of those additional items that are still very wholesome and edible and everything, and we just use that for ground beef production. And so you mentioned you're definitely involved, and I think you two are being very modest and humble in your background with numbers and accounting. I have a feeling you're probably helping quite a bit with all the yield calculations that you're going into and setting up your systems for doing things like that. So just wanted to interject a little bit on that side, but both of you have clearly a pretty cool starting point. And yes, when this podcast is being recorded, we're kind of right in the midst of the entire COVID deal and working through that situation. It's been very impactful to the industry as a whole. And when we say as a whole, all the way from the folks raising the cattle, all the way down to the folks selling the meat in the grocery store. Now, you folks are working in a plant, a packing plant of pretty considerable size still nonetheless. And maybe you can mention the number of head that go through there. But then also, can you both talk a little bit about how has the plant modified things to make sure that the product is going out still and the customers are still being fulfilled with their needs?
Yeah, so prior to COVID and even now during it, we're harvesting about 15 to 1600 head of cattle per day on an average, doing 5 days a week. During the first midst of COVID and when we were unsure of how exactly to handle things, there was definitely a reduction in those numbers, but not very long afterwards, we were able to return to full capacity. There's been lots of different things that the company has done to try and keep people safe, and as well as minimizing contact with, we do have a lot of employees, and it's a small space. It's, there's not plenty of room for them to run around outside. They are working in tight quarters. Maybe Abbie could speak a little bit more to what fabrication was able to do to help reduce the numbers they had while still staying active. But things weren't too different for the harvest side, but we did have to change a lot for fabrication with the sheer number of employees that they have.
Well, and to put things into context too, for those who haven't had a chance to get into a larger scale commercial packing facility, is that, the conditions are that it's a manufacturing setting. And so just about any place that's either building or in this case, taking apart things in a system, it takes a lot of employees, a lot of skilled labor to do that. And so there has been quite a bit of discussion of the space and the number of employees in a building, in a room. I would say that, it's been in the past still a pretty good environment, but tell us a little bit about, maybe how on the fabrication side, you guys have addressed some of these challenges to maintain worker safety and still keep the wheels turning.
Okay, well, I think the important thing you talked about is worker safety, because yes, the consumers need meat, but if we don't keep our employees happy, we're not going to operate. So the company did a really good job right off the bat. They started taking care of the employee areas, making sure things were getting sanitized. We started doing temperature checks just to make employees feel safer at work. Anyone that did not feel safe was allowed to leave. And then the company was really good about just approaching what was happening, telling people what was going on so there wasn't fear. The first thing we did after we kind of got those initial boxes checked is we split our shifts in fab to limit contact. So we split our shift or our crews in half, and then we made the days a little bit longer. So we slowed the chain down. People worked 3 days on, 4 days off. So they worked a longer day, but it kept our crews split in half. So if one had a higher rate of infection, hopefully it wasn't passing to the other crew. And then after we did that, we kind of started putting things into our fab floor that would allow us to work back towards a full crew. So now there's dividers between everybody on the tables. There's a little plastic divider. Everybody's required to wear a mask, leads and utilities, and supervisors, people that are in contact with more people, have even more restrictions. And then we're working a little bit longer hours right now to not have to work Saturdays, but we're almost up to normal production.
And you mentioned normal production being about that 15 to 1600 head per day. And again, to put this into perspective, there are plants in the United States that are upwards of 5,000 to 6,000 and more head per day capacity. And so you guys are still definitely a plant that is of considerable size, but not quite to the size of some of those others that are out there. Regardless, from my discussions with others in the industry, you're taking the proper steps to make sure that the workers are safe, and it's similar to what others are experiencing. I know for those listening in now, if you haven't listened to some of the previous podcasts, Nelson Gatos from American Association of Meat Processors talked about some of the smaller plants and how to work through some of these COVID challenges at the time. But then, of course, you're still able to produce the product, and that's that end goal, right? Is as long as the workers' safety is maintained, we're still making sure that we're getting the orders filled. And I would say that you guys are probably having pretty good success now that we're back up to speed. Would you agree?
Yeah, we're pretty close to normal numbers, I think. And I think it's really a testament to the leadership, because a lot of plants saw big closures, and maybe the smaller size helped us control it a little bit more, but we were able to stay running the whole time and keep our employees working.
And I'm curious, since you guys have a fair amount of employees, how you guys try to mitigate, with all COVID-19 infections and all that? How do you guys manage when you go to coffee or lunch, or how do you guys do that?
So some of the areas that have the capability to do so, we're able to stagger their breaks. It's difficult for a majority of the plant being on the assembly line style of processing. It doesn't quite work that way, but some of the other areas that aren't quite so time sensitive with the assembly fashion, we're able to stagger their breaks, as well as Abbie had kind of alluded to before, we have increased sanitary protocols, thorough and sanitation of the entire area, break room areas after every single break, every time some people go back to work. But also all of our tables and benches, they added in barriers, so that way people can sit in closer proximity while still being safer and having that barrier between them and other employees. But also, one of the largest things that the company pushed for is we expanded our outside seating capabilities. So rather than having everybody crammed into one area, they got lots of picnic tables and umbrellas and other things like that, awnings, so they could expand out into our outside areas, just to help spread people out, to keep people safer.
Yeah, we've done a couple different things too, as far as trying to get rid of anything that causes employees to clump up. We don't have our microwaves anymore, and our vending machines, we got rid of about half of them and split them up to kind of try to limit the crowding. We also have a different knife exchange protocol going on right now, so people aren't all piled up by our knife room trying to get their knives in the morning. There's X's out like you see at stores. People are made to stand 6 feet apart. And then there's also managers out at every break trying to kind of break up crowds, make sure that people are still wearing their masks even when they're not on the floor, and encouraging people to kind of just keep their space, only sit 4 people to a table, and really just keep following the safety protocols we've put in place, even when they're not necessarily on the line.
How many employees do you have? And you guys can maybe address that from your each of your specific areas.
Well, I know in total we have about 1,000 employees. I think a little bit over right now. Granted, a lot of them are still on leave of absence, which they're allowed to do because of safety concerns. Mm-hmm. In Fab, we have 5 tables and pack off, and there's about 60 employees in each department. So I can't do the math that fast, but it's a pretty sizable chunk of people.
Yeah.
What is that, about 400, 450? Yeah. So a good chunk of our workers are in fabrication, packaging, and pack off.
And I know you guys process Wagyu cattle predominantly in your process facility. And we were talking earlier about some of the challenges, since we typically have like a highly marble beef, that may be a challenge when it comes to breaking down carcasses. How do you guys manage when you're trying to speed up the line, but you also have to, when you cannot be very quick, right? Because it takes longer to fabricate those. And the second question would be, with all the fat, the excess fat that you guys trim away, what do you guys do with that? You guys render it? How do you guys try to mitigate and minimize that fat disposal, or what are some of your procedures in your plant?
Yeah, so it's definitely different when we get into Wagyu cattle, especially if sometimes our coolers are a little bit temperamental and they can get really cold. It makes cutting fabrication really, really hard. It's hard on the employees. It takes a lot of time. But we basically slow down our chain speed a lot. So where in normal cattle, I think we'll do like 40 to 50 more head probably an hour than we do in Snake River Farms, which is our Wagyu brand. I want to say that's right. And then, but we haven't been at normal chain speeds in a really long time.
Right.
And all of our fat goes to rendering. So basically, we try to leave as much fat in our trim as possible. I mean, it all gets tested to make sure it's at the proper fat percentage, but we always want to be on the high side of that variance because fat is just going to rendering. So we're really not getting any value out of that otherwise.
Well, and the reality is with these with these cattle, and again, to give that perspective and the uniqueness of the particular outfit that you guys work with, AgriBeef, is that you're really kind of one of the only players in North America of size raising and harvesting these Wagyu cross type animals. And for those who are less familiar with that, those are the descendants of the Kobe style beef that's raised over in Japan, that goes for astronomical prices if you can acquire it from there. Whereas you have a much more affordable but still premium type item that's being raised under the Snake River Farms brand. And for those who haven't had a lot of fabrication experience out there, if you're talking about animals that are raised for quite some time, they get pretty good size, and you get that additional fat that's on there, as Francisco's alluded to. And so that additional fat, number one, when it's cold, it's harder to cut through, right? But then it's also additional byproduct that needs to be considered. And so you have the fat that can be left, the fat trimming that can be left on the subprimals themselves. You have the category of ground beef, but we can't necessarily utilize all of that. But you do have on-site rendering as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do have the on-site rendering. We're able to produce tallow and bone meal from our rendered products. And just as well as to touch on that, we do try and stay on top of we know there's excessive amounts of back fat and whatnot. So we try and remove as much of it as we can during the harvest process. It's difficult. There's only so much you can do. By USDA regulation, we can't touch anything within a certain distance of that 12th rib split where they do so we can do grading. But we are able to remove some of the back fat in the rib area, just not within those parameters. And a few other locations that there's a lot of excess fat that we know we're going to trim off when it gets over to fabrication anyways. We try and remove it. But then we're able to, as I said, render those products and produce tallow and meat and bone meal, which helps recuperate the costs and get rid of these byproducts that we'd otherwise have to dispose of.
You know, a lot of folks that are out there that maybe aren't quite as connected to the meat industry as you guys in the plants or others that are maybe part of the meat sciences that are out there. They don't realize that all of that still gets used. It's just that the value proposition decreases. And so if there is that additional fat that can't necessarily be sold as cover on a subprimal or ground beef, you know, it's still used. It's just used in a different byproduct format, and it's not quite as valuable as if we could have sold it as just traditional meat cuts, right? With some of this discussion we've been having, and I don't know if we've mentioned it yet already, but it is public information, and for those of you who are listening to this just after this gets published, this podcast gets published, is that AgriBeef is planning on building starting up a new plant down in southern Idaho, maybe to focus on some of these Snake River Farms type cattle. And if if you guys wouldn't mind, could you tell us a little bit about those plans?
Yeah, it's a very exciting situation that we're in. We were recently, about 2 weeks ago, we were able to officially announce through a press release that the plans to build another another beef processing facility in Jerome, Idaho. It's a pretty exciting opportunity for us within the company, as well as the cattle producers in the region, providing another processing opportunity for producers to sell to and feed yards. But the goal is to be able to focus a little bit more into our program cattle, that most of which are raised in the American Falls area or in the Parma, Idaho area. It'll help save a little bit of travel cost and taking them all the way to Toppenish, Washington, but also just allow us to have a facility that's more designed for these larger cattle, both of our premium brands, but also, as everyone has alluded to earlier, cattle are getting larger and larger every year, and it's becoming more of a normal thing to see. So having a facility that's designed for larger cattle will really help with the processing that we're doing.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty exciting times, especially for folks like you who are early in your career as meatheads. And so that hopefully you'll get a chance to be a part of kicking that plant off in the future. We're excited to see where things end up. I know you're still in the trainee phase, but I think there's a lot of opportunity still to come. I know you guys are superstars there and learning a lot, and that's kind of a big part of it. And I know one of your mentors regularly says, be willing to learn and listen and absorb all that's going on, because there's a lot of really cool things that happen at a packing plant, large or small. There's a lot of great things to encounter. And so with that, I kind of personally, I'd like to conclude with one additional question. I would guess, I'm going to set the stage here, I would guess both of you probably didn't start your academic career thinking you were going to end up in a meat plant. You probably didn't graduate high school like I did, thinking I'm going to cut meat the rest of my life. And I kind of do that on an amateur basis, of course, but life has changed and led you on a couple of different career paths and led you to where you are now. And what are some thoughts that you may be able to leave the audience with, especially the younger audience, on those that may be interested in a career in the meat operations business?
Well, to speak to your first comment, I definitely didn't expect myself to be in this position 2 years ago, let alone 5 years ago, or however long it was that I was graduating high school. Wanted to work for the state and be a game warden, so I definitely came down a different path. But I think it's really just a testament to, people always say, go into something with an open heart and be willing to adapt and overcome to your surroundings. I took all the opportunities I had head on, and as Phil said earlier, I wanted to work for the meats laboratory at the University of Idaho, because I enjoyed hunting and fishing, and I processed all my own game anyway, so it was pretty familiar to me and something I enjoyed. And to be honest, I was looking at buying a wedding ring, so I needed some cash, and they were hiring. And then a few years later, I found myself in an opportunity to come work for Washington Beef, and I dove in without any second guess, because working in the meat industry is truly been a blessing, especially over these last few months. One thing that I will say that, maybe not everybody recognizes, but especially with all this COVID stuff going on, a lot of things are going to change when these pandemics happen or things like that. But one thing that'll never change is that there's a definite demand for beef production in America and throughout the world. And it's been a blessing to be a part of an industry that I had a job to go to every day and to keep working to supply money for my family. So it's, if you're at all interested in trying out the industry, I think it's an absolutely great opportunity. It's been a blast. It's been difficult at times, but I've learned a lot, and I continue to learn a lot. I think that I will for as long as I'm able to be in this industry.
That was good advice. I also did not see myself being in a meat industry or a meat industry job at all. I wanted to be a vet, and if that didn't work out, I was going to go get my CPA. So instead of fixing animals, I'm cutting them up now. But
Higher success rate, though.
yeah, exactly. A lot higher success rate. But I think Brendan kind of hit it on the head, which is be open and willing to show up and dive into something new. Even when I took this job, I still thought maybe my path would be more business orientated, maybe corporate. I kind of jumped on this opportunity because I hadn't been exposed to the plant side as much. And I think I like it more and more every day. It might be hard to pull me away from it if they ever try. So I guess my advice would be, if you're going to get into the meat industry, be ready to work hard, because it's not a career for the faint-hearted, I guess. It's difficult. There's challenges every day, and like Brendan said, in the middle of a pandemic, you still have to show up to work because people are counting on you and your product. But just come in with an open mind and be willing and ready to learn how to use the resources you have at hand. I mean, coming in our position is kind of tough. You're working with people that have 25 plus years of experience. And me especially, I really don't know a lot about what's going on here. I'm learning more and more every day, but you can't catch up to that. You're never going to catch up to 25 years of experience in 1 year. So really just appreciate the knowledge that those people have, try to learn from it, and then watch what they do and see how you can bring that into your own management and also what you can do better. And I think another word of advice would just be find a company you want to work for, because that I knew I wanted to work for AgriBeef. I liked their values. I liked what they did. I was fascinated with their business model. And I mean, they were just a really standout company from the beginning, and I'm very, very happy that I got this opportunity and I chose to take the job.
Well, that's pretty cool. And that is some great advice. Get to know those that are out in the meat business. And if you're a younger individual looking for a career, get to know the small locker plant nearby. Find out what the medium-sized processor is doing. And I would bet there's probably a large-scale outfit that's not far away as well. I've been in the meat business for some time. Now I'm more in the academic side of it, but I like to pretend that I'm still an industry partner. And I would tell you that the overwhelming majority of those in the meat business are companies that you would like to work for. We're in the Pacific Northwest. AgriBeef is kind of our go-to. It's the brand. But get to know some of the others that are out there, especially for those younger folks out in the Central Plains. There's a number of different great outfits to work with and for, large and small. And so be willing to learn, be willing to listen, and just get familiar with the opportunities that are out there. And like you both have alluded to, there's a lot of career opportunity and a lot of, I would say, quite a bit of job security too, because people still need to eat, and there's definitely some demand for beef out there right now. So with that, I'll pass it back over to Francisco.
Thank you guys for being here today. A lot of people will benefit and understand about what you do. We know you have a very busy schedule and appreciate it a lot. We hope to see you guys soon. Thank you again. All right, with that, we end this episode. Thank you a lot for listening, and be ready to hear from more meat specialists in the following episodes. We will have more discussions about hot topics in the meat industry. Please subscribe to our website at www.meatspad.com, and you will receive a welcome email, and you will also be receiving notifications on the new episodes that we're releasing. Thank you again, Stay tuned and see you the next time.